In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Hello, viewers, and welcome to tonight's program. Conscientious Christian wives want to bring out the best in their husbands, to help our men be all that they can be, especially when it comes to his taking the reins of his divinely assigned role as leader of our household. So in this conversation tonight, we want to consider what we can do to inspire our husbands to take that lead and to support their continuing to do so, all without nagging, hopefully. So tonight, thank you so much, Colleen and Dana, for joining us.
Good to be here.
What's going on with you lately, Dana?
Well, not a lot going on right now, but we're fixing to go on vacation, so I'm very excited about that. Leaving Friday, we're going to Virginia. We're going to Colonial Williamsburg, so we're looking forward to that. Yeah,
I love that. That is a fantastic place to visit.
Oh, it is.
Seeing the marching band with the young men going down the road.
It's been years since we've been there, and we've wanted to go back for a long time. So we're going to be gone about 10 days. So
well, have a great time. Colleen, what's going to be going on in your life?
Well, I'm looking forward to Atlanta Women's Weekend. My daughter's going to be running a workshop there.
Wonderful.
And so that's something new.
Yes.
Working on Bible class materials all the time and continuing with a home study with the couple that we've been studying with. We're in Judges now. So that's going to be, a little more character and plot and excitement. So that's what I've been doing.
How wonderful. How wonderful. I just so admire you both for all that you do in the Lord's work. And thank you I know they always say, ask the busiest people to take on another project. So I'm so happy that you, in your busy lives, your very productive lives, that you've taken the time for this very important conversation. So the first thing we thought we'd talk about was, why should wives encourage their husbands to lead our families? Let me try that again. Why should wives encourage husbands to lead their family? Dana, what were your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, first off, it's a command, and in Genesis 3:16, and I'm reading from the ESV, it says, to the woman, he said, I'll surely multiply your pain, and you shall bring forth children, and your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. I know a lot of the older versions say your desire shall be for your husband. But a fascinating point when you go and look at the meaning of that desire has the idea of craving or longing for, in the sense of an animal pursuing its prey.
Really?
And so your newer versions will say your desire will be contrary to. And it's the same phrase that's used in Genesis 4:7 when it talks about Abel. And it says, if you do well, will you not be accepted? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire in the older versions is for you. In the newer versions is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. So there's this contrast of, and I think we see it all the time, if we're honest, even in our lives, but we see it in our society where women's desire is to be equal to or even challenge the rule of man. That's what feminism is all about. And we struggle with that in our homes. And this is a command that, no, he will rule over you. Mm-hmm. And that's a command that I have to deal with and control those desires whenever I want, to usurp authority that does not belong to me. And I think that would be my first go-to. Why should I want to encourage him? And because that's a command I have to do it.
All the way back since creation.
Yeah, all the way back. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we're commanded to respect our husbands in the New Testament, Ephesians 5:33. Let the wife see that she respects her husband. So I mean, it's just that would be my number one reason, because
that's a number one reason.
Good reason. Yeah.
What were your thoughts, Colleen?
Well, before I answer, I want to ask both of you a question as we're going into this discussion.
Yes.
Do you see this as a problem to solve, or just something else in the Bible that we're told to do? Do you think that most Christian men are leading and they're just knocking it out of the ballpark? In your decades of experience, I think maybe both of you were preachers' wives, so maybe you've got more insight about this. Are men doing it naturally? And do we have to be, helping them along with this? Or is it, what is the situation as you see it?
Well, I do have an advantage of having interacted with 140 conservative churches of Christ and have been in the homes of many, many families during the course of doing all of that. And I have witnessed some amazing spiritual leaders in these families. And I know, in addition to that reality, Colleen, I can say both that I'm so encouraged by what I've seen. And I can also say that I see this as the number one primary thing that is going sideways in our culture. And I think Dana is right. This has been a hard thing since creation of there's an equality where we are equal as husband and wife, and our souls are worth the same in the eyes of God. But the roles that God has given us, we've spent too much time paying attention to the culture. And over these decades, I mean, many, many decades, almost 50 years now, of trying to do life not according to the words of the very one who created us, has made a lot of things go sideways. And I think men are confused by knowing even what they're supposed to do, because it's like they can't win in this culture. And so, yes, Colleen, I think there's so much work that needs to be done in this. And this is a critical conversation that we're about to have because of what's at stake.
And just to add to that, I think that when we see time and time and time throughout the scriptures, commands, corrections, discipline from God pointing to these very things, that tells me that is a problem that, and I don't know how else to say it, but by nature that we do. I think by the nature of sin that we do, both on the side of the women and the men. God corrects and condemns the men often in the Old Testament for the way they treat the women, and et cetera, et cetera. And that was a very patriarchal society, and women were just kind of tossed aside. And yet there was the struggle we see with Abraham and Sarah, the struggle that they had. Sometimes she was a great counselor for him, other times not so good, and he gave in to her or he didn't. And that struggle, I mean, look at all the women that Jacob had and all the trouble that was in that whole family. And that all goes back to leadership. And yet these were godly men. So I think this is just the course that sin puts us in. And it is always a command that that's what Proverbs 31 is all about, is how the woman ideally should be. And it's all about supporting her husband. Why is all that there? Because I need it. Because you need it.
Okay, so then we've established that you do feel like that this is like a problem or an issue where
Many homes, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm like Cindy. There are amazing men in the church today, all over the world, that are leading well and fulfilling the command. But there are many that it's not. And I think even when you see these amazing men, and if you were to talk to them about this issue, they could give you how they've struggled and the things they've had to go through, and probably the help that their wives have given them and the support. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then my answer to the question is why should we encourage our husbands? I look at it from maybe a different angle, and that is that not everybody wants to lead. That's just not their personality. They don't naturally just want to do that. I know people who say, oh, you should take this job because you get to tell people what to do. And I'm going, I don't really, that's not really, that doesn't get me excited. So just because you want to be saved, and just because you want to follow Jesus doesn't mean that you just naturally just jump up there and you're a leader, or that you have a heart to teach. So we have to mature ourselves. We have to develop ourselves, and just understand that it's not for everybody. It's not like a big thing that everybody wants to do, but we need to do it.
Yeah. They
need to do it. So that's why the wife is a good person to help her husband to kind of point those things out. One time in a class, kids class, we were talking about marriage and the roles of the husbands and wives, and this boy said, well, I can't wait to I want to be the husband because I get to tell everybody what to do. Yeah. And so that's what somebody will say. They'll say, I want my way. So yeah, sure, I'll be the husband. Or yeah, I want everybody to do what I say. But that's really kind of an immature thing. So we have to mature. And so we need to, that's a really good reason for women, so the spouses, to keep each other on track, to keep that goal urgent. And instead of like going back to your what you would normally do, you gotta be an adult about it. And so together we can get this right.
Yeah. Whether or not it comes natural, we need to do what God says. And there's so much benefit to doing and living life the way that God has prescribed, even within our family. So, I mean, one thing to consider: why should wives encourage husbands to lead our families? Is so that he can spend eternity with his Creator for having fulfilled the reason for which he was created. He was created to be a leader, whether it feels that way to him or not. He was created to overcome and become a leader. Also, because in time, he will be happier enjoying the fruit of having done the right things. Though they may not in the present be the easier things, rarely is that going to be the case. So, and one of those pleasures will be to see how his sacrifices and his labors have enriched the lives around him and have matured him along the way. That's a great motivation, I think, for us to encourage our husbands to lead our families. The other thing at stake too, 1 Peter 3:7, so that God will hear his prayers and so that they can be answered, right? So there it says, likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you to the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. So we need those prayers answered. The kind of things that go on within our families, we are on our knees almost every day and just asking God's assistance. We need to keep that line of prayer, help him keep that line of prayer open. This is what's at stake, whether or not he's going to embrace his role as leaders. Anything else you guys wanted to add on this?
I do want to add a scripture. I don't know if our producer Isla can get this up there, but it's Ephesians 6 verse 4. Okay. So Ephesians 6 verse 4, the Apostle Paul is emphasizing instructing your children instead of exasperating them. So, Ephesians 6 verse 4 reads, "And you fathers," it says, calls them out right there, "and you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord." So whether they feel like they're teachers or they want to be teachers, they are.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the one where, I think that the husband that doesn't really want it, he's not really feeling it, I would say he can't argue with that.
Yes. Or 1 Corinthians 11:3, the head of the wife is her husband. Or Colossians 3:19, where it says, "Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them." So it's a servant leadership, right? It's a gentle leadership. It is not what you described there, Colleen, with the child who's like, "Oh, I get to be the boss." Sorry, honey, you get to be the servant. You get to be the servant.
I told him that. We set things straight.
Well, and one, and it's the whole chapter, and we're very familiar with some of the scriptures in that chapter, but Deuteronomy 11, which Moses is commanding the children of Israel, and it starts off, "Keep the charge, his statutes, his rules, his commandments always." And then later in that chapter, it talks about where you teach them to your children, talking with them in the way, when you're sitting in the house, when you're walking by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up, you'll write them down on your doorposts in your house and on your gates. And then the promise is that your days and the days of your children may be multiplied in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers to give them as long as you live. And he goes on the rest of that chapter with promises. And then at one point he says, "I lay before you blessings and cursings." And it's all based on whether you're going to follow me. But the emphasis is you teach this to your children. This is so important. And it's that leadership. Now, he's not just speaking to the fathers there. I think he's speaking to all of them, but because it's to the children of Israel. But we know from many other passages, the father is the leader of the home, and that the wife is to be in submission to him under his rule. I think she should, and we'll talk about other things in a minute. But I just think the blessings that come from that leadership is another reason to support him and to encourage him, because not only are those blessings for him, but they're for me and they're for my children and my grandchildren.
Yeah.
So
important. So let's then transition to our conversation to talk a little bit about what we can do to inspire them to do so. So I'm going to throw out a few ideas. If you have any comments, feel free to interject. The first thing I thought about with what we can do to inspire our husbands to be leaders is where and when possible, demonstrate respect to your husband so that he will feel moved to live up to all the best that you're genuinely seeing in him, and that you are very much expecting of him, like only expect the best. Begin that with an honest appreciation and admiration for what's true. Now, we're not talking about flattery, but there's plenty in your husband that he is doing so well at, and he just will thrive on your respect and your voiced appreciation for all of that. Often we need to try honestly to see things from their point of view when possible, to be sympathetic with their ideas and desires, especially when they're rooted in truth. There's going to be a lot of times where he has the best idea, and that's fantastic. You want that. You want him to have an even better idea than what you have in any given challenge. I would suggest talk about your own true weaknesses and mistakes before talking about theirs. When you're wrong, model how easy it is to admit it in its entirety very quickly, just so you can get back on track, So if that's the culture in your family, like, oh, boy, was I wrong, that can get you back on track more quickly. And when you are forced to call attention to their failings, do so with the humble tone, the body language, and the kinds of facial expressions that you also appreciate when you're being corrected. So I have a few more ideas, but I want to hear what you think. Colleen, you want to start us off with what your ideas were?
Yeah, your audio sounds a little garbled. I don't know if.
Okay, so you share your ideas, and I'm going to run and get some headphones while you're sharing your ideas. Okay?
And your audio sounds good right now.
Yeah.
So just saying, okay. So I think point out why this is not difficult to get started. I think one of the easiest places to start is by, hopefully this would be for people who have children, but start with teaching your children daily. It is not that difficult. Start by buying a children's Bible storybook, and then set an alarm on your phone, and then tie a daily Bible story with the kids to a habit you already have. For instance, maybe right after breakfast, we're gonna have our Bible study. We do this every day right after breakfast or before supper, or just something that it's a habit you already have. You know you're already going to be doing that. So tie the Bible study to that, and anybody can read a Bible story to children. They love it. They want, the one thing they want is to have their mom or dad's undivided attention. So that it works. They love it. And that's a great thing. I would say try this, do it in the morning. Study after study shows that most people have their most self-discipline first thing in the morning. So make that your priority. Just say, we're going to start here. Let's start with just a Bible study, and you keep both of you on, your husband and you just keep each other on track. And if one misses, he says, "Oh, I'm late for work" or whatever, just don't let it go by. Say, "Well, okay, well maybe we'll do it when you get home, but we're going to do it today. We want to do this daily." So those are some practical tips.
I love it. I love it. What were some of your practical tips, Dana?
Well, I think one of the things that I thought about, and this is in how do we inspire them in their leadership, and I look at leadership in the family, and hopefully they're in the church with you. And I think about, we need to be partners and supporters in that work. And Colleen just kind of talked about ways that we can partner in teaching our children by having daily Bible studies. But I think there's so much that, and as a preacher's wife, you can relate to this, you have to be a partner in that work with them. As an elder's wife, you have to be a partner in that work with them. And we who are older have been through that, perhaps, but that takes early work on my part. I can't support him in the Lord's work. I can't even support him in teaching my children if I don't know the word myself. And so that is so important, that I take my role as a partner, as a helper, a supporter. That's what we're told. We're to be helpmeets to our husband. And I challenge my husband all the time about the Bible, because I'm a skeptic. I'm just one of those people. And he'll preach a sermon, and we get in the car, and I'm like, okay, now what about this and this and this? And he usually wrong. Sometimes, he'll, but that is something I have to challenge myself, to be curious enough, to be interested enough to learn God's word. A couple of other things. Don't be constantly criticizing, and you talked about that a little bit earlier. Encouraging them. It's easy to criticize them. Never make fun of them in front of other people. Never belittle them. Never, never, never. And don't compare them to other people, to other men. All men are not alike. All men are not. I think some men are just natural leaders. Some people are just natural leaders. We're not all song leaders. We're not all preachers. We're not all Bible class teachers. And they don't have to be all that to be a leader in their home. There are quiet, some of the greatest leaders, some of the best elders I know are just quiet, humble men, but they lead with their whole attitude and everything. And so I cannot compare my husband to other people. And when I do everyone a service. Love him for who he is. And I think that's another thing is I need to always make sure he knows I'm on his side.
Yes.
That's going to encourage him to lead and be willing to lead if he knows I'm his friend, his partner, his helper. Yeah.
Yes, so much. So the thing that I really appreciated, Colleen, about your comment was how preventative it is. Like, you get started on those Bible classes when you have toddlers, and you carry that through all of the dramas that you're going to prevent when this is just what happens. Because in the course of doing that, you're also bringing up things that are happening in your lives that are learning experiences, and it just opens that up. And the thing that I appreciated, Dana, about your comment, I thought about Jordan Peterson's phrase that the best wives are a benevolent adversary, when you were talking about, challenging his line of thinking, and just that fencing when it's done. Of course, when it's done as a bestie would do it, right? But you're sharpening his skills, and that prepares him for leadership. If you challenge his logic and his application of the scriptures as he integrates other scriptures, that really helps him, be that better at wielding the sword of the Spirit to the advantage of those around you in your congregation.
That's so important. And yet people like me have to be really careful about that, because I have to often check my attitude, and maybe attitude isn't it, because it's not that I'm challenging him with a bad attitude.
It's
the manner in which
attitude,
and the approach, and that's something over the years I've had to, because I used to say, that is so stupid. I can't believe you would say it that way. I can't well, that just doesn't really fit into being submissive now, does it?
I think a good word is transparency.
I'm sorry.
Transparency. It's thinking, well, I could just say this to him because I see a little hole in his argument.
Oh no, I can see a big hole, so I let him know.
Right. And see, it's transparency. It's like you kind of have to sort of adjust that for the person that you're talking to.
That is the challenge always to us as wives is how do I sharpen his skills? How do I be his friend?
Yeah.
And yet do it in a loving, humble, and I'm still working on that, and I'm 68. And I'm just saying, we've been married forever, and I'm still working on that, because that is not natural for me.
Me
but
too.
I know that it is a command for me.
Yeah. Well, and I had a few ideas, since it's also, I struggle with the same thing, Dana. Here's a few thoughts along those lines of this approach that we're talking about, this attitude, because the thing is, they need to feel the pressure to do better from within themselves rather than just to stay in our good graces, right?
Right.
So we need to tread softly by avoiding an argumentative tone. We do have to talk out the hard stuff, definitely. We do have to have those most awkward conversations, but it is much better to have these touchy conversations than to shove, like their failings in the fog, or our failings in the fog. Someone has said that, you hide things in the fog and you're going to bump into them and be tripping over them and be bruised and bloody for lack of communication. So I love that analogy. But again, no one likes to feel forced or pressured to do something. So instead, we can honor his leadership by asking questions and sharing ideas to come to an accurate assessment of what is presently true. And then moving towards solutions that will improve the quality of your life together. And so I would suggest, when at all possible, let them do most of the talking so that they can feel that the solutions are theirs and that they'll own them more. Like if you're just always telling him what to do and the best idea, and if you'll just listen to me, and instead, the old book, Dale Carnegie. Have you guys read How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Yeah.
Very old book. Sometimes the old books have some of the best ideas. But one of the ideas that I think that may be helpful for us sometimes, as we're encouraging our husbands to become the leaders that they can be, is to move the conversation in such a way that they are led to come to the conclusions themselves and feel like they're the ones who thought of it. I don't know if that makes sense, but you try to influence them to come up with the brilliant solutions by asking just the right questions and such, right? So it's in whatever way that you can help them, help the light bulb moment to come off in their own head rather than, ask their own conclusion and come up with those solutions. I think that builds confidence, when it's not always you that's right, no one wants to be hounded by their wife.
No. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry,
let me approach it from the other side though. All of what you're saying is great. It's just like a big conversation about the big, well-rounded attitude when we are helping each other adjust and helping each other get better. One thing I do with myself is if I don't like it that somebody told me, oh, well, you mispronounced this or you did that, or, I think about when I have been in situations where I really wanted to be a starter on the team, or I really wanted to be the main anchor. Did I get mad because somebody told me I needed to do this better? Well, I might not have liked it all the time, but I did it. If the coach said, do it this way, I would, because I wanted to be the best I could be. So a lot of times when people don't, they don't like it when somebody says, really, I think there's another point, that you left out of your argument this morning. If they don't like that, I would also say, what about all those golf videos you watch about the perfect putt? And why is that okay? And it's not okay for me to bring this up, which I think is kind of a thing that's kind of holding you back. I'm not saying you have to choose your transparent moments, but I am saying look at how you deal with criticism in something like, if you want to be the shortstop and you're trying to get that position, you'll do whatever it takes and listen to all the criticism.
Yes.
Well, and I would say this to that argument, which is a valid point, that sometimes things need to be said. But when someone's criticizing me, boy, how they approach me with that criticism makes a whole difference in how I'm going to accept it. And when I think about how I accept, or how I accept criticism, then that should make me think about how I need to buffer how I give criticism to him. And I can say really brutal things if I just couch it in a loving way. And that is always my challenge, because, I'm like, but I think that is something, if I really want to lift him up and encourage him, then first I got to know my man, and know how he's going to respond. And there are things that I know if I say it this way, you can just forget it. He's instantly turned it off. And yet I know if I say it another way, and usually the best way in our situation, and we'll just talk about correcting him in something with the scriptures, what I see as a correction. Often it's not. But I know that I can say, okay, I might be wrong here, and maybe I don't understand it, but could you explain to me, here's what I think, what do you think? Well, man, now I've got a discussion, and I can now accomplish what my goal is, hopefully, if I'm right. But if I just went, well, that was just, I don't understand why you said that. That was a dumb comment today. Well, forget it. And I think it's just important how I approach, and we all need to learn. And even if you're young and new in a marriage, it won't take real long for you to understand, for you to get the message of what button you hit. And that is always a challenge in every relationship. And we don't need to be pushing those buttons. We need to, if we truly want to be the partners and the helpers and the helpmeets to our husband, to encourage them in this goal, then I need to be careful and pay attention to my guy and learn to love him and work with him carefully. Okay, shutting up now.
I love that you guys are bringing out two very important points. Kind of, I don't know if you could say it, different sides of the same coin, but I love, Dana, that you're right. Being humble is much more persuasive. And Colleen, you're absolutely right. No matter how correction comes, that's your bestie that's the person bringing out giving you the gold of knowing how to better do something. And so on our side, take it however it comes for your benefit and those around you. So beautiful comments, ladies. And the last couple of things I wanted to say before we transitioned in our conversation was, when suggesting solutions, indicate how simply the solution could be corrected so that it feels doable. Because sometimes our guys are overwhelmed. They have, we only know a fraction of the pressures that they've gone through all day long in their workplace or whatever, and so then we have these other challenges. So painting that solution, paint that clear picture, what the beauty of your ideas could look like and feel like in full bloom. I would throw that out there. And then throw down the challenge and set a good example of focus, consistent attention, and pray every day that God's providence will give that increased and make fruitful our combined efforts, because we can, I guess I want to just say this once within the program is, like you were bringing out, Dana, about all of the rewards and punishments in the book of Deuteronomy for obeying God or not obeying God. And sometimes you can do a very good job, but you have no control over the free will of other people. And we don't have control over the free will of our husbands. And there is not a perfect recipe where suddenly you can remove the free will of another human being, including those that are raised in your household. So we do the best we can, and we are on our knees. And God will cause the increase. God will cause the increase. And sometimes the increase is a little bit delayed. It takes longer than we thought it would, like decades sometimes. Right? All right. So obviously being a leader is the willingness to be criticized, and sometimes justly and sometimes unjustly. So what can we say or do to ease the pain of this reality for the men that we love who are doing their best to serve? I mean, it really is part of leadership to be criticized, isn't it, ladies? Like, you cannot be a good leader without that. Like, that's going to happen. You cannot please all the people all the time. No. Christ was criticized. He was perfect. So what are your thoughts on this, Colleen?
Well, this is my favorite of the questions because it shows, Cindy, your insight about human nature.
Okay.
And I think you put it really well when you said, when you are the one bringing the criticism, then do what Dana was talking about, the buffer, the diplomat. Be careful, the way that you present. But when you are the one receiving, especially if you are someone who is telling people how they should live, or you're some sort of expert, which is what we're told to do. We're carrying the gospel message. So that's what the gospel message brings. It's how people must change it. There are all facets of that. And so when you are a public speaker or a teacher or a dad or a mom, and you are leading in any way, just like what Cindy just said, you have to develop a thick skin, period.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And even if it's your 4-year-old pointing out a mistake that you made, that it's like, you have to just say, oh, okay, well, I see. Yeah. And even if it's sometimes people's comments are bogus, they're absolutely bogus. And they thought they saw something and they didn't really see it, or they heard this or that. And yeah, you can correct that. But I would say even, if we get a cancer diagnosis, do we say, oh, well, I'm not going to that doctor because he was not very nice to me. We don't do that.
We don't do that.
Yeah. So when you're the one taking the criticism, it'll always be better, even if it's your enemy. I have had some of the best criticism I think I ever got was somebody that was an enemy.
Wow.
And he really pointed it out to me that I was a hypocrite, and it made me mad, but he was exactly right. And he did me a big favor. So it's hard. And most people are not in fields where they get criticism very much. Most of us aren't performance musicians or athletes or something where people are constantly bombarding you with all this, what you did wrong or whatever. Preachers, they get that too. So we have to develop it. You have to develop it. And if you're going to be mom, dad, or husband or wife, you just have to learn to do that.
Yeah, there's an honor in that. When you handle criticism, especially if it's just criticism, and you handle that honorably, maybe you learn from it, or it's like, woe to you when all men speak well of you. But when you use there's great honor in that because of the amount of self-control it takes to be adult about it. What are your thoughts on this, Dana?
Isla just put up a comment that she had read, a good quote she read. It said, leading while bleeding. And I don't know if you heard that, leading while bleeding. I love that.
Okay.
I think looking back at my husband being a preacher and the glass bubble you live in, and lots of criticism over the many, many years, the 45 plus years he's preached. I think one of the things, and I took this very much, is what can I do to help him through this time period? And I wrote down, first off, to always let him know I love him no matter what the outcome of this is. And kind of going along with that is I need to be willing to walk this road with him, and through that criticism, whether it's just or unjust. Some of the criticism was just, some of the stuff he's been accused of is just insane, extremely painful, hurts your reputation and everything else. And those are tough times. So for me to support him, I can't rub salt in his wound. I need to love him, encourage him, and I need to be willing to support him and walk through that difficult time with him. And I think that is probably one of the best things. And then when he is justly criticized, we go back to how do I help him with that? And I think then you have to gently discuss and engage in that. But knowing my God, I got to do it gently. I can't do it hard. If I want to have any influence with him, I have to be willing to cry with him, to sit there with him. And you got to have a tough skin. And my husband has a tough skin, but I've seen him cry because it is
so painful.
And my dad used to say, nobody can love you like a brother in the church, but there is nobody that can hurt you like a brother in the church. And our men who are leading, whether it's in the family. I mean, we hurt each other in the family. We always say we hurt the ones we love most. But we need to remember they are, I love this, leading while they're bleeding, and they still have to be the leaders. And, I can get criticized and go in my corner and cry and be done because I'm not the leader. You can't do that.
Yes.
I need to understand that. I just go back to being that support and being willing. I know so many preachers' wives who have walked through so many things with their husbands, and then I know some who just said, "No, I don't want anything to do with that."
Yeah.
What? Yeah, and we can't do that. And I don't care whether your husband is a businessman or a preacher or a contractor. I have a son who's a contractor. He's had tough stuff, and his wife has to support him. And that's what's going to make a marriage work. And that's what's going to lift him up and make him a better leader.
Yeah. And we just need to refuse to be among those who unjustly criticize him. And like you said, if the criticism is accurate or somewhat accurate, never to excuse him, but rather ask if he thinks if there's any truth to it. And remember it's Satan who is called the accuser, Revelation 12:10, right? So don't allow your heart to collect things that in his humanness he does to annoy you. And you need to fix your eyes on something else. Do not become the accuser. That's what Satan is. And that would not be fulfilling our mission to be a great encouragement to him. State the truth if it comes up. But here's the thing too, ladies, don't emasculate him by fighting his battles for him.
Amen to that.
Because there is a nobility to not always defend yourself and instead allow the truth to surface in time so that our enemies regret their assumptions and eventually see that although we knew that truth all along, that we took care of them by not retaliating or humiliating them. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. That's why.
Okay, cool. Okay, very good. So let's then talk about, for us, we conclude our conversation here. What should a wife do to provide for the needs of her souls of her family if her husband continues to refuse to lead? This can happen. A lot of men are like, leadership, no thanks. I don't need the extra work. I have enough responsibility as it is. And the drama of dealing with people, who needs that? So if we have to pick up the slack, if there's slack, there's too much at stake within the family. So do you guys have kind of almost like bullet point ideas of what these conscientious wives and mothers can do?
Don't let someone else's lack of initiative keep you from doing your job or keep you from being enthusiastic about it. Don't let a wet blanket affect your energy. That's easier said than done. But your children need daily leadership and spiritual training one way or another. And so, even if you have children, you can't just roll over and play dead. And it really, so if somebody's a Debbie Downer, you're fighting that all the time. I don't know if you've ever been around somebody that's always there kind of,
Yeah. Don't be the Debbie Downer.
Yeah. That can really affect you. So don't just say, I'm not going to do that. I've got to be enthusiastic, and maybe that'll rub off on him if that's an issue with your spouse.
What are your thoughts, Dana?
Well, the first thing I thought about was in Acts 16 and verse 1, we're told that Timothy's father was a Greek. And I think we can conclude he was not a believer. And Paul reminds Timothy in 2 Timothy 1 that where he got his knowledge and strength was from his grandmother and his mother. So who taught him? Well, it wasn't his father, it was his grandmother and his mother.
Yes, good point.
And later, it says in 2 Timothy 3:15, from childhood, you've been acquainted with the sacred scriptures that are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Jesus Christ. Where did he get that from? And I think we can conclude it came from the women in that we're having to take up that leadership in the spiritual leadership, which to me, I mean, certainly I homeschooled my children all the way through. And so education to me is vital. Oh, it's so important. But the most important, if I taught my children, all three, and I have two boys, all three to sew. They all had to take piano lessons. They all had to take tennis lessons. They all had to do this and that and that and that and that.
Wear them out, Dana.
If I failed in all of those things and they know the Bible, that's all that matters. And I think that is a responsibility that every parent has. I think it is particularly the father has that leading role, but if he won't do it, I'm not relieved of that. There are so many scriptures that just say to, the one we talk about, train up a child as he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it. That doesn't say fathers, that just says train up your children. There are so many scriptures that teach us that we as parents are responsible for our children. And if my husband doesn't take the lead in those things, it does not relieve me of that responsibility. And
Amen.
There's nothing more important than teaching and leading my family where I believe morally they need to go.
Yes.
And there are a lot of husbands out here who are not leaders. And ladies, somebody's got to save these children, and somebody's got to save you. And if you're waiting for the man, you may be in big trouble. And I hope you're not, but that's a reality. And I have a responsibility. So I don't really have any bullet points. I have a lot of scripture.
That's okay. It's all good. And I really appreciate the scriptures that you've brought forth today, Dana, very, very much. And I really cannot top what Colleen mentioned on the daily discipline of being in the Word together as a family, just habitually, where it's not even negotiable. It just is part of life, like dinner. But I would add to my little bullet points, well, sort of bullet points, would be doing what's best for children educationally in such a way that you know what's going on. So that may look different for different families. But, if you're going to spend that time that, as Colleen described, every day, you don't want them to send them out the door and they get, 6 hours of exactly the opposite of everything they just heard. And so conscientiously choosing how you're going to educate them. I can't believe how encouraging it is. The next generation of parents, a lot of these parents are finding it much easier to raise their kids without oversatiating them with screens or constantly trying to manage screens, like constantly going and turning it off and it's back on and turning it off because it's moral darkness again. And instead of navigating all of that all day long, there are a lot of young parents that are like, no, we can see how that went in the generation before us. We're not doing screens. We are doing art and gardening and DIY projects. We are doing outdoor adventures, cooking, and teaching our children to gain real life practical skills around the house. There's reading and travel and conversations, doing volunteer work together, having people come into our home and showing hospitality so our kids can hear these amazing conversations among adults that,
people.
Yeah. What's that? One more time.
Real people.
Thank you. Real people.
It's not just moral darkness. It's just, even if it was the most wholesome stuff on that screen all the time.
Good point.
It's still on the screen. It's still in your childhood.
Yes. Yes. So in closing, I'm just going to say, they say if mom ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So, a happy wife, this is what your husband is aiming for. So be the happy wife. Let your face light up when they walk in the room. Be excited to tell them something joyous that happened to you. This goes for your husband. This goes for your kid. Like, set that vibe in your family of just being a happy mom and just accumulate all those inside jokes with your husband and your kids and making happy memories and just have a good time with them. You know, God wants us to enjoy one another and reap the benefits of living this beautiful godly life that he has put forth for us when we all do what we're supposed to be doing as leaders and as encouragers, as husbands who are leading and wives who are very, very supportive of their leading. So thank you so much, ladies, for all of your wisdom during this conversation, all of the scriptures, the applications. I just really appreciate how hard you work on your prep for these kinds of conversations. And with that, we'll say good night.
Good night.
Hi, everybody.